Times are critical for Brazilian farmers. Highly dependent on fertilizer imports, the industry has some important decisions to make in a context of war in the Middle East and new EU sanctions imposed on Russian imports. Joining me today is Tomas Pernias, StoneX Brazil market intelligence analyst. Thank you for joining me, Tomas.
Glad to be here.
So how does the conflict in the Middle East affect Brazilian fertilizer imports? We discussed last time we met Brazil's high dependencies on imports.
Exactly. The Brazilian market is already feeling the effects of the conflict in the Middle East, and as we all know by now, Brazil relies on the international market for its nitrogen fertilizer supply. In 2023, for example, more than 90% of the urea consumed in Brazil was imported. So, when a conflict like this breaks out in a strategic region for global fertilizer production, Brazilian buyers become concerned about what's happening and the potential impact on prices. So, since the conflict began, urea prices in Brazil have jumped by more than $50, and we've also seen higher prices for ammonium nitrate, ammonium sulfate. So, in just a few days, buyers have seen price increases of more than 10%. And I'd like to emphasize that the timing of this crisis is especially bad news for Brazil. Brazilian fertilizer demand tends to grow in the second half of the year, especially for nitrogen. Imports usually increase from July onward as buyers begin preparing their nitrogen supply for the next season. So, this is a defining moment for production costs in Brazil. And on top of that, producers are already facing a difficult moment because credit costs are higher than they were last year, soybean and corn prices are uncertain, and right now, fertilizer affordability indicators, especially for phosphates like MAP, are showing the worst ratios we've seen in years. So, without a very clear sign that this conflict will de escalate soon, and with fertilizer production down in the Middle East, there is a good chance that the situation for Brazilian producers could get even worse.
Also, the EU went forward with larger penalties on Russian fertilizer imports. It'll raise EU farmer prices and disrupt normal global trade patterns. Will this have a ripple effect on Brazil? And can Brazil import more Russian fertilizer?
First of all, Russia is already one of the main suppliers to the Brazilian fertilizer market. Brazil relies on Russian supply for ammonium nitrate, MAP, potash, and the presence of Russian products in Brazilian imports has been growing in recent years. So, over time, we can say that Russian supply has gained importance in the Brazilian market. So, you brought an interesting question. Could Russian products become even more significant for Brazil? Well, theoretically, yes, they could. However, we must remember that there are many other markets that could also benefit from more Russian supply. The United States, India, and even China could take in more Russian supply. And we had similar questions when the United States increased tariffs a few months ago. Would suppliers prefer to sell to countries where they wouldn't face any tariffs? Would traders shift their routes and favor markets like Brazil where no tariffs were imposed? Again, in theory, Brazil could benefit from this. However, market conditions are very tight in the nitrogen segment. Market conditions are also tight in the phosphate sector. And we are once again living through troubled times when it comes to fertilizer supply. So we haven't had enough time to properly analyze how these tariffs are changing fertilizer trade flows or how taxes are shaping new market directions. So, yes, when tariffs are imposed elsewhere, there is often a sense that the Brazilian market could come out on top. But it's just too early to say that the Brazilian market will be the main beneficiary in a world of rising tariffs, or that Brazilian buyers will benefit from lower prices than the rest of the world. It's just hard to make that assumption when Brazil still relies so much on imports, when the Middle East remains somewhat unstable, and when corn and soybean prices are still weak.
Excellent. Well, thank you very much for your insights there, Tomas.
See you next time.
For more videos like this, please do like and subscribe.